Hi, this is Harold Simansky with the mbaMission podcast. I'm here today with my two colleagues, Gavriella Semaya. Hi, Gavi.
Hello.
And Jessica Shklar.
Hi, Harold.
Hi, Jessica. How are you?
I'm good.
So today we're here to talk to you about community service. What is it? Why it matters? What do you do about it? Jessica, what is community service?
Well, I think community service in business school context is really a proxy for showing the business schools that you are an active member of your own life. So
Right.
if we think in very broad categories about business school applications, there's the academic side. There's the professional side, what you've done and where you're going, career goals. And then there's everything else. And everything else to me is sort of a proxy for community service. And it could be hobbies and interests. It's really a way of showing the school that you have a rich life and you will be a full participant in the business school experience, even outside the classroom. Is that how you define it?
Yeah, well, listen, how do you show it, though?
Well, I think there are a lot of ways to show it. The most traditional is volunteer work outside of your job.
Yep.
So you're a big brother, you do volunteer tax prep, you coach a little kid's soccer team, whatever. But that's not the only way. What are some other things that you've seen?
Let's flip it over to Gavi.
Yeah.
Gavi, when you think about community service, what do you think about?
You know, I almost want to remove the word service because I think that tends to force people to think overly narrowly about what you were saying.
right.
That sort of traditional, you need to work at a soup kitchen.
Right.
Which, if you do, is wonderful, but it doesn't have to be service in the narrow sense of the word. It's some kind of engagement in the communities that matter to you. And so, oftentimes there is a service component where you're helping somebody, but it could also be launching an organization, an entrepreneurial side hustle that you might have. It could be a hobby that you're really dedicated to.
Right.
We were talking about, a client who had a podcast, since we're podcasting, we've had clients who run ultra marathons or whatever it might be, something that demonstrates commitment and that they're adding value to, to their community, to the world, so to speak.
I actually have a great anecdote about this. Several years ago, I did a free consultation, and she called in. She said, I got rejected from all my schools in round one. I'm now trying to figure out what I did wrong for round two. And so we talked about her work. We talked about her academics. And then I said, well, do you do anything outside of work? And she's like, yeah, nothing important. I said, well, what do you mean by not important? She said, well, it's nothing relevant to business school. I said, okay, but that's not what I asked. What do you do?
Yeah.
She said, I like pottery. I said, okay, tell me what that means, you like pottery. She's like, well, I have my own studio, and I go there 4 nights after work, and then I spend the weekends taking classes, but I also have done shows. I said, what did you do? Do people pay them? She said, yes, I actually donate that money to kids who can't afford pottery classes, and I teach those classes too. I said, so how many weeks are you spending on pottery? She's like, hours. And she said, 30 to 40 a week.
Right.
I said, did you tell the business schools? It's not on your resume. Did you tell them? No, why would they care? And, I wish she had ended up working with us so I could see what happened.
Yeah.
But it's just,
But that brings up what they're looking for. Why do they care about this? Why are they asking, right? It's another way for them to get at your values, what you do, your contributions, right? They want to understand. It's an indicator of how you'll contribute to their communities.
Right. And I think that's the bottom line is business schools are not just trying to fill a seat.
Right.
They are in a classroom. They're trying to build a community that ensures that your 2 years or 1 year, 18 months, the length of time of your program is the most amazing experience you've ever had, accepting people outside the classroom.
And think about what that shows about her.
Right.
She's creative. She's
dedicated.
committed. She's dedicated. She's thoughtful about, how she can contribute in multiple levels.
Yeah, she's a lifelong learner. I mean, there's so many things.
Right.
So if it's not pure community service, because I started saying that is the typical volunteer work, there are other ways to show it. One of the most common questions people ask me is, does work that I do at my job count?
That
and
is
count
a great
is
question.
such a annoying term because count, well, does that mean you can list it under the community service section of your on the application? Yeah. But if you do anything at your job that you're not paid for, you would be paid the same amount if you didn't do recruiting, organize, take your daughters to work day, run
a mentorship committee or whatever it is.
The Asian diversity group. That all counts as community service. It's a way of showing that you are actively involved in the communities in which you spend your time.
And that's often for candidates who don't have a ton of quote unquote community engagement, community service outside of work. I often tell them, what am I going to do last minute or something like that? That's probably the easiest place to find something because you're already spending your time there. Right. And it can be informal. Ideally, it is some sort of, organized event, committee, et cetera. But I mean, at a minimum, you can mentor people informally, right?
That's
so,
Yeah, how do you even communicate this notion of informal community involvement?
So I think that there are 3 places in the application where community service in the broadest terms or life outside work comes up. Your resume, and remember that for many schools, the person who interviews you never sees anything but your resume. So you want that
If it's
resume.
not on there.
Right. You want that resume to have an interesting section at the bottom that says, what do you do? So I would have a bullet point for activities, and maybe I'd have a bullet point for interests or hobbies. Communicate it. The application itself has short answer questions, and they always ask, what are you involved in outside of work? How many hours? Both of those two places, to me, are where you tell the what. What do you do? And then there are essays. Berkeley's What Makes You Feel Alive When Doing It. NYU's photo essay.
Booth, what are you like outside of the office?
Who are you? Yeah. Tuck has one that varies. They change the wording every year, but it's essentially show us that you're a nice person. And certainly Stanford's What Matters Most to You and Why, or Harvard's this year, their essay on community, on curiosity. So those essays are where you don't go into the what as much, but into the who, how, why. What is it? And that leads to, does it matter what community service you do? It has to be something you care about. If you don't like old people, don't go work at a senior center. You should bounce out of bed on the day of your volunteer work and say, this is the best day. And by the way, you should bring your partner or your friends with you, right? Now you've shown leadership. You've organized other people to go.
That's right. And listen, the reality is you may have to go back in time a little bit. Business schools fully recognize that if you're working 60 to 80 hours a week, yes, involvement in your community is very tough. But tell us about another experience that you had when you were involved in your community of the time. Go back. You may have to look at college. That's fine. Just make them communicate that fact that you look outside yourself.
But the farther back you go, I would say the more relevant it is for you to bring that story current by talking about how that impacted you today, or what lessons you took from that. I had a client once who was talking about a pretty transformative and traumatic experience she had when she was about a preteen. And we needed to bring it present. We've talked a lot about whether it was a good topic, but she was able to point to some really specific choices she had made in her recent life that were directly affected by that experience when she was 9. So it took some creativity in the essay. We certainly did not open it with, I was 9 years old. We opened it with a much more current setting. But she was able to show how that impactful experience really had been impactful in that it's continued to impact her today.
No, that makes sense. Harvard Business School used to use the term engaged citizen.
Engaged citizenship, yeah.
And from that perspective, I always love that term because it really shows two things. First of all, that you're actually doing something in an active way, that you're engaged, as well as you're being a good citizen, meaning whatever you're doing isn't inward facing, it's outward facing. And this notion here of just getting more involved with people. Because at the end of the day, business school, a key component of it is building your own community there. And if you're going to be the person who goes to the library every Saturday night, that's not what they're looking for by any
What about
means.
family experiences? Have you had clients who didn't have anything organizational, but they had been raising their siblings or supporting
Sometimes
their parents?
it's personal like that, where they're caring for somebody or supporting a family member. Sometimes it's, I had a client who baked cookies with her mother, and her mother ended up turning this into sort of a hobby. And after she retired, it became a bit of a career for her. I mean, it started just with during COVID baking. They had nothing else to do, but it became something more meaningful, more constructive, more productive. So yeah, family absolutely counts.
Right. I had a client who had to quit his job because he had a sick parent and go back and raise his brothers for several months. And he initially thought that was just sort of dead time. But we talked about what it showed in terms of his willingness to sacrifice for his family, his willingness to change his perspective.
To make difficult decisions,
what
he
he
learned
learned
from in business.
What he learned from raising younger brothers.
It
was a pretty powerful story in the end.
No, absolutely. And I think our point here is community involvement, engaged citizenship can be very, very broad. I think that's really the reality, as well as it can look at every aspect of your life. It can manifest in many different ways.
One of the questions I ask clients who tell me they have no activities and nothing outside of work is I'll say to them, if I had your friends and family in a room and I said to them, how has Joe made a difference in your life? Who's going to have a story? And usually they say, well, I would hope many people would. But then I'm like, okay, who would have a specific story? And that's where you start to see those stories come out. And so you really want to think about impact. One of the other mantras I use for this topic is participation is good, leadership is better. So if you are doing something and you enjoy it, Get a couple of friends involved.
Right.
If you hear that your organization has a once a month volunteer activity on a Sunday that they give, offer to organize one 3 months from now.
Right.
You can write on your resume that you're in charge of that, even if it hasn't happened yet.
That's right. I always tell my clients it's far better off that you're serving soup in the soup kitchen than you're on the soup kitchen's board. Because the reality is it's really talking about getting your hands dirty with some things, getting involved, getting very passionate about something.
But not to say that serving on the board isn't valuable, especially if you're doing something, if you've redone the financials for the board, if you've helped them choose a new director. Just spending time on the board is not valuable.
I think it's being a member of the soup kitchen, right?
Right.
Anybody
Actively
can sign up.
involved.
Right. Anybody can sign up for something. Anybody
Actually
can write a check or attend an event.
Right.
But
it's a great way to show community service. It's a great way to reflect for the business school just how you're engaged in your life, and that's a key part.
Absolutely. And if you want to help telling these stories, if you want to spend some time with one of us, really helping you better understand what community service may mean for you, by all means, go to the mbaMission.com website, sign up for a free 30-minute consultation with me, with Gavi, with Jessica, with Debbie, with Krista, or any one of the other consultants. Thank you very much for joining us today.